Okay, welcome back. Today, this presentation will be discussing how the code book is organized. And in addition to how it's organized, we're going to be talking about how to use it. It's very similar to the Thomas Guide maps that were used many years ago, where you had to know how the Thomas Guide map is organized and how to use it in order to find your street addresses. If you recall those maps, you can relate that to using the code book as a source of information and how that information is indexed, and then how to find that information. So this will greatly increase your chances of finding the answers quickly and efficiently. If you have a code book available, it would be a good idea to follow along with it in front of you as we go through the presentation. The structure of the code book has a table of contents like any book. It has several chapters, 1 through 8, and chapter 9 gives tables, and after the tables, it has an annex called an annex, which gives more tables and more reference material, mostly for engineers. The last section, or the last element of the code book, is the index, and that's the most important and the area that we'll be spending most of our time in. So a little bit about the table of contents. It's a good secondary source of information after the index. The table of contents is arranged by article, and the articles are divided into part numbers. They use Roman numerals to identify the part numbers. And the bonus to the table of contents is that it has page numbers for each of those subtopics, or each of those part numbers. This is the example of how the articles are arranged. We don't call them chapters, we call them articles, and this describes the topics of each of the articles. So the articles are divided into parts, and the parts are in sequential order, identified again by Roman numerals. The index will refer to a topic, such as the electrode system, by giving its article number 250, followed by a part number. In this case, it's part 3. So in this other example, you have part 7 identified here in article 250. The parts are further divided into sections. Sections are identified by numbers with decimals. So in this case, the section number 240.21 is identified here. It's under part 2, and if you want to further break down that section number into categories or into subtopics, the code will use letters, bold type letters, followed by numbers, followed by lowercase letters. So if you wanted to reference this article bit of information right here, you would reference it by stating the article 240.21, 240.21. B, the subtopic under that is 1. A further subtopic under that is lowercase 1. And a further subtopic under that would be lowercase a. Another feature in the codebook are tables, and tables can be inserted within the articles themselves. So carefully observe the description of the tables. Tables are arranged, the descriptions and titles of the tables are arranged here, and tables are identified by columns and rows. So the tables are contained within the article. So in this example, table 344.30 would be in section would appear in section 344.30. The same with this table here. This table 314.16 would appear in article 314.16. Now there's this other section of tables specifically identified toward the end of the book in chapter 9 as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Informational notes are also a feature. They give supplemental information that is related to the section number, and they are followed immediately after the section number. They're kind of like footnotes. So they're identified again in sequence, and they just give supplemental information that is related to the section. Another feature in the codebook are exceptions. There are exceptions to most rules, and they could be easily identified because they are in italic, and if there are several exceptions, they will be in sequence. They're placed like the informational notes immediately within the section or after the section, and in this case, this article has one exception. The codebook reserves chapter 9 to be a place for other tables, the majority of tables. So we will only be using 4 tables primarily that are important for our questions as we look for the answers to questions. Table 1, Table 4, Table 5, and Table 8. Also observe that before the tables are presented, they have notes to the tables, which gives more information about how they use the tables and information about the tables themselves. The annex is another major part of the codebook. However, we will only be using Annex C. There are Annexes A through I, but we're only concerned with Annex C. And within Annex C, there are several tables within Annex C. Basically, this section gives the number of conductors that you could put in conduits, and of course there are several different types of conduits which are listed here, and the very helpful feature in the Annex C section is that they give a table of contents of all the tables that identify the different conduits here, and then they give the page numbers. So in other words, you could find the table very quickly by the page number. So this is in Annex C. It starts on page 744, and it gives the page numbers of your conduits. The last and most important part of this discussion is the index. And the index is an alphabetized list of topics in the code book. Each topic is identified in bold, and under each topic there are also many subtopics, also in alphabetical order. And if you notice here, after each subtopic they reference a address or a section number which they want you to return to that will have that information on it. So this is very, very useful as we read the questions. We identify the key words and we look up those keywords in the index. We find an address for each keyword, and that we turn to it and we find our answers or related information for our questions, and that's how we're going to be able to turn to the codebook and find the answers to the questions we have. The index is organized by words, whereas the table of contents is organized by articles. So given the topic, now you could find it in the index. You could identify the part section or the section number or the table number and reference that number and you're able now to turn to it immediately. This will save you time and increase the chances of you getting the correct answer or finding the correct answer. We will practice much with this structure, and you will be a master at finding information in the codebook.